post-war boom and suburban growth. The period from 1945 to 1970 represented the golden age of American manufacturing, and Michigan stood at the center of this unprecedented prosperity. The state's transformation during these decades involved not just economic growth, but fundamental changes in how and where people lived, worked, and thought about their future. The reconversion from wartime to peacetime production proceeded more smoothly than many had anticipated. Pent-up consumer demand from the war years, combined with accumulated savings and favorable government policies, created a massive market for civilian goods. Michigan's automobile companies were perfectly positioned to meet this demand. The automobile industry experienced explosive growth in the post-war years. Production, which had been virtually halted during the war, resumed at unprecedented levels. By 1950, Michigan was producing over 6 million automobiles annually, far exceeding pre-war production levels. New automobile models reflected changing American lifestyles and aspirations. Cars became larger, more powerful, and more luxurious, embodying American confidence and prosperity. The development of automatic transmissions, power steering, air conditioning, and other innovations made automobiles more comfortable and accessible to a broader range of consumers. The success of the automobile industry was closely linked to federal policies that supported suburban development and automobile ownership. The Federal Housing Administration and Veterans Administration provided low-cost home loans that enabled millions of Americans to purchase homes in new suburban developments. The interstate highway system, begun in the 1950s, provided the infrastructure necessary for automobile-dependent suburban lifestyles. Michigan was a major beneficiary of suburban development trends. The Detroit metropolitan area expanded rapidly as new suburban communities were built throughout southeastern Michigan. Cities like Livonia, Warren, Sterling Heights, and Troy grew from small towns to major suburbs in just a few decades. The suburban boom created new patterns of residential segregation and economic inequality. Middle-class white families moved to new suburban homes, while many African American families remained in inner-city neighborhoods with declining housing stock and reduced economic opportunities. This pattern of white flight had profound consequences for Michigan's cities and metropolitan areas. The United Automobile Workers Union reached the peak of its influence during this period. Under the leadership of Walter Reuther, the UAW negotiated contracts that provided not just higher wages, but comprehensive benefits, including health insurance, pensions, and job security provisions. These Treaty of Detroit agreements became models for labor contracts throughout American industry. The UAW's success in negotiating benefits packages helped create a large middle class in Michigan. Automobile workers could afford homes, automobiles, and consumer goods that had previously been available only to more affluent Americans. This prosperity supported the growth of retail businesses, service industries, and recreational activities throughout the state. Michigan's population grew rapidly during the post-war boom, reaching over 7 million by 1960. Much of this growth came from continued migration from the American South, as both white and African American families moved to Michigan seeking economic opportunities. Education became a major priority during the post-war boom, as Michigan sought to prepare its workforce for an increasingly complex economy. The state invested heavily in public education, building new schools, and expanding educational opportunities. The GI Bill also provided educational opportunities for veterans, leading to rapid expansion of higher education. The state's economy diversified significantly during the post-war boom. While automobile manufacturing remained dominant, other industries grew in importance. The chemical industry expanded to serve growing consumer markets, while the defense industry continued to be important during the Cold War period. Cultural life flourished during the post-war boom. Detroit became known as Motown, the center of a musical revolution that produced some of America's most influential popular music. Berry Gordy's Motown Records launched the careers of artists like Diana Ross and the Supremes, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, and many others who became international stars. By 1970, Michigan had been transformed from a primarily agricultural and resource extraction economy to one of America's most important industrial states. The state's success in automobile manufacturing, its strong labor movement, and its commitment to education and innovation had created a model of industrial prosperity that was admired throughout the world. Civil rights and social change. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s had profound impacts on Michigan, challenging established patterns of racial discrimination and segregation while opening new opportunities for African Americans and other minority groups. Michigan's experience with civil rights reflected both the state's progressive traditions and the deep-seated racial inequalities that had developed despite legal guarantees of equal treatment. By 1950, Michigan had the largest African American population outside the South, concentrated primarily in Detroit and other industrial cities. While Michigan law prohibited racial discrimination, informal practices maintained segregation in many areas of life. African Americans often faced discrimination in hiring, were restricted to certain neighborhoods, and attended predominantly black schools. Detroit became a major center of civil rights activity. The city's large African American population, strong labor movement, and tradition of political activism created favorable conditions for civil rights organizing. The Detroit chapter of the NAACP became one of the organization's most active and influential branches. The United Automobile Workers Union played a particularly important role in supporting civil rights. Under Walter Reuther's leadership, the UAW became one of the first major labor unions to actively support racial integration and equal opportunity. The union's support was crucial for the success of many civil rights initiatives. Detroit's Walk to Freedom in June 1963 was one of the largest civil rights demonstrations in the nation's history up to that time. Over 125,000 people marched down Woodward Avenue to demand jobs, justice, and equality. The march featured Martin Luther King Jr., who delivered an early version of his "I Have a Dream" speech. However, the civil rights movement also revealed deep divisions within Michigan's communities. The 1967 Detroit riot, one of the most destructive urban uprisings of the 1960s, demonstrated the frustration and anger that had built up in African American communities despite civil rights progress. The Detroit riot began with a police raid on an illegal drinking establishment in a predominantly African American neighborhood. and escalated into 5 days of violence, looting, and arson. The uprising resulted in 43 deaths, hundreds of injuries, and the destruction of thousands of buildings. Federal troops were required to restore order. The riot had profound impacts on Detroit and Michigan. It accelerated white flight to the suburbs, damaged the city's reputation, and led to increased investment in urban renewal and social programs. However, it also focused attention on the underlying causes of urban unrest and led to new efforts to address racial inequality. The civil rights movement also influenced the broader struggle for social justice in Michigan. The tactics and strategies developed by civil rights organizations were adopted by other groups seeking equality and justice. The women's rights movement, the labor movement, and other social justice causes all drew inspiration from the civil rights movement. Women's rights became an increasingly important issue in Michigan during this period. The state was an early leader in passing equal rights legislation and expanding opportunities for women in education and employment. Michigan, women played important roles in the national women's rights movement and helped secure the passage of federal legislation prohibiting sex discrimination. The environmental movement also emerged as a major force during this period. Michigan's industrial history had created significant environmental problems, including air and water pollution, toxic waste sites, and habitat destruction. Environmental organizations worked to raise awareness of these problems and advocate for stronger environmental protection policies. By 1970, the civil rights movement had achieved significant victories in Michigan, while also revealing the depth and complexity of racial and social inequality. Legal barriers to equality had been largely removed, but informal discrimination and structural inequalities remained significant problems. The civil rights era established Michigan as a state with a strong commitment to social justice and equality. This commitment would influence the state's response to subsequent challenges and would help maintain Michigan's reputation as a progressive state, despite economic and social difficulties in later decades. Economic transformation and deindustrialization. The period from 1970 to 2000 marked a fundamental transformation in Michigan's economy as the state grappled with the decline of its traditional manufacturing base and struggled to adapt to a changing global economy. This process of deindustrialization, while painful and disruptive, ultimately led to economic diversification and the development of new industries and opportunities. The roots of Michigan's economic transformation lay in changes that had been developing for decades, but became acute in the 1970s. Foreign competition in automobile manufacturing, particularly from Japanese companies, challenged the dominance of Detroit's Big Three automakers. Changing consumer preferences, energy crises, and new government regulations all put pressure on Michigan's traditional industries. The 1973 oil crisis was a watershed moment for Michigan's automobile industry. The dramatic increase in gasoline prices created demand for smaller, more fuel-efficient vehicles that foreign manufacturers were better positioned to provide. American automobile companies, accustomed to producing large, powerful cars, were slow to adapt to changing market conditions. Japanese automobile manufacturers led by Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, gained significant market share in the United States during the 1970s and 1980s. These companies offered vehicles that were more reliable, fuel efficient, and affordable than many American made cars. Their success challenged fundamental assumptions about American manufacturing superiority. The recession of 1979 to 1982 hit Michigan particularly hard as automobile sales collapsed and unemployment reached levels not seen since the Great Depression. The state's unemployment rate peaked at over 16% in 1982, the highest in the nation. Entire communities dependent on automobile manufacturing faced economic devastation. The human cost of deindustrialization was enormous. Hundreds of thousands of manufacturing workers lost their jobs, often permanently. Many were forced to accept lower-paying service jobs or to relocate to other states seeking employment. The psychological impact was also significant, as workers who had expected lifetime employment found themselves obsolete. Plant closures became a regular feature of Michigan's economic landscape during the 1980s and 1990s. General Motors closed dozens of facilities, while Ford and Chrysler also eliminated substantial capacity. Supplier companies, which had grown up around the automobile industry, also faced closures and consolidations. However, the process of deindustrialization was not uniform throughout Michigan. Some communities were able to adapt more successfully than others, depending on their economic diversity, educational resources, and leadership. Grand Rapids, for example, successfully transitioned from furniture manufacturing to a more diversified economy based on healthcare, education, and business services. The automobile industry itself began to adapt to new realities during the 1980s and 1990s. Companies invested heavily in new technologies, improved quality control, and reformed labor relations. The development of lean manufacturing techniques, borrowed from Japanese companies, helped improve efficiency and competitiveness. Michigan's government responded to deindustrialization with various economic development initiatives. The state created programs to attract new businesses, support existing companies, and promote entrepreneurship. Tax incentives, loan programs, and other financial assistance were provided to encourage investment and job creation. Education and workforce development became major priorities, as the state recognized that economic transformation required a more skilled and adaptable workforce. Community colleges expanded their programs to provide training in new technologies and industries, while universities increased their focus on research and development that could support economic growth. The technology sector emerged as an important component of Michigan's new economy. The state's engineering expertise, developed in the automobile industry, proved transferable to other high-technology industries. Companies in aerospace, defense, medical devices, and other sectors established operations in Michigan. By 2000, Michigan had made significant progress in adapting to the realities of the post-industrial economy. While the state still faced significant challenges, it had developed a more diversified economic base and had begun to rebuild its competitiveness in both traditional and new industries. The technology sector had become increasingly important, with companies in software, telecommunications, and other high-tech industries establishing significant operations in Michigan. The state's universities had strengthened their research programs and were contributing to innovation and entrepreneurship. The automobile industry, while smaller than in its heyday, had become more efficient and competitive. Michigan remained the center of American automobile manufacturing and had attracted significant investment from foreign companies. The industry's adaptation to new technologies and market conditions had helped preserve many jobs and maintain the state's industrial leadership. Modern Michigan, challenges and renewal. The dawn of the 21st century brought both unprecedented challenges and remarkable opportunities for renewal to Michigan. The state that had defined American industrial might found itself at a crossroads, forced to reimagine its identity and economic foundation while drawing on its deep reserves of resilience, innovation, and community strength. The new millennium began with optimism in many sectors of Michigan's economy. The automobile industry was experiencing strong sales. The technology sector was growing rapidly, and the state's universities were gaining recognition for their research and innovation. However, this optimism would soon be tested by a series of economic shocks that would fundamentally reshape Michigan's landscape. The dot-com crash of 2000 to 2001 affected Michigan's emerging technology sector, while a national recession reduced demand for automobiles and other manufactured goods. However, these challenges paled in comparison to the structural changes that would transform the global automobile industry over the following decade. The 2008 financial crisis and subsequent recession created a perfect storm for Michigan's economy. Automobile sales collapsed, credit markets froze, and unemployment soared to levels not seen since the Great Depression. By 2009, Michigan's unemployment rate had reached 14.2%, the highest in the nation. The crisis culminated in the bankruptcy of two of Detroit's Big Three automakers. Chrysler and General Motors both filed for bankruptcy protection in 2009, requiring unprecedented federal intervention to prevent their complete collapse. The federal bailout of the automobile industry became one of the most controversial policy decisions of the era. However, the federal intervention, while controversial, ultimately proved successful in preserving Michigan's automobile industry. Both General Motors and Chrysler emerged from bankruptcy as leaner, more competitive companies. The restructuring process, while painful, eliminated excess capacity and modernized operations. Ford Motor Company, which avoided bankruptcy by mortgaging its assets and restructuring independently, also emerged stronger from the crisis. The company's One Ford strategy focused on global integration and efficiency, while new products helped restore profitability. The automobile industry's recovery was aided by several factors. Federal fuel economy standards encouraged innovation in fuel-efficient technologies, while consumer preferences shifted toward more efficient vehicles. The development of electric and hybrid vehicles created new opportunities for Michigan's automotive engineering expertise. The Obama administration's support for electric vehicle development was particularly important for Michigan. Federal grants and loan guarantees helped companies like General Motors develop vehicles like the Chevrolet Volt, while new companies like Tesla began to establish operations in the state. Detroit's emergence as a center for electric vehicle development represented a remarkable transformation. The city that had been synonymous with internal combustion engines became a leader in developing the technologies that would replace them. The recovery of the automobile industry was accompanied by broader economic diversification efforts. Michigan worked to attract new industries and support the growth of existing sectors beyond manufacturing. The state's life sciences sector, in particular, experienced significant growth during this period. Michigan's universities played crucial roles in supporting economic diversification. The University of Michigan, Michigan State University, Wayne State University, and other institutions expanded their research programs and technology transfer activities. These efforts helped create new companies and attract investment in high technology industries. Detroit's downtown renaissance became a symbol of Michigan's broader renewal efforts. After decades of decline, the city's downtown began attracting new residents, businesses, and investment. The revitalization was supported by both public and private initiatives, including major investments by companies like Quicken Loans. The development of a vibrant startup ecosystem in Detroit and other Michigan cities reflected changing economic dynamics. Young entrepreneurs, attracted by low costs and available space, began establishing new companies in technology, food service, manufacturing, and other sectors. Michigan's agricultural sector also underwent significant modernization and growth during this period. The state became known for specialty crops, organic farming, and value-added food processing. Michigan's wine industry, in particular, gained national recognition and became an important component of the state's tourism economy. The craft brewing industry experienced explosive growth in Michigan, with the state becoming home to hundreds of small breweries. This industry combined Michigan's agricultural resources with its manufacturing expertise and entrepreneurial culture, creating a successful new economic sector. However, Michigan's renewal efforts also faced significant challenges. The state's population continued to decline in many areas as young people left to seek opportunities elsewhere. The brain drain of educated young adults became a major concern for policymakers and community leaders. The Flint water crisis of 2014 to 2019 became a national symbol of infrastructure failure and environmental injustice. The crisis began when the city switched its water source to save money, but failed to properly treat the water, leading to lead contamination that affected thousands of residents, particularly children. The COVID-19 pandemic that began in 2020 created new challenges for Michigan's economy and society. The pandemic disrupted manufacturing operations, closed restaurants and entertainment venues, and forced schools and universities to adapt to remote learning. However, the pandemic also demonstrated Michigan's resilience and adaptability. The automobile industry's response to the pandemic was particularly noteworthy. Companies quickly retooled facilities to produce ventilators and other medical equipment, demonstrating the flexibility and technical capabilities that had long characterized Michigan manufacturing. By 2020, Michigan had demonstrated remarkable resilience in overcoming the challenges of the early 21st century. The state's economy had become more diversified. Its institutions had adapted to new realities, and its communities had shown their capacity for innovation and renewal. Contemporary issues and future prospects. As Michigan moves deeper into the 21st century, the state faces a complex array of challenges and opportunities that will determine its future trajectory. The lessons learned from decades of economic transformation, combined with emerging trends in technology, demographics, and global economics, are shaping Michigan's approach to building a sustainable and prosperous future. Climate change represents both a significant challenge and a major opportunity for Michigan. The state's industrial history has contributed to environmental problems, but its engineering expertise and manufacturing capabilities position it well to develop solutions. Michigan has emerged as a leader in electric vehicle development, renewable energy technologies, and environmental remediation. The Great Lakes, which have always been central to Michigan's identity and economy, face new pressures from climate change, including rising water levels, changing precipitation patterns, and ecosystem disruption. However, the lakes also represent enormous opportunities as sources of fresh water, renewable energy, and recreation in an increasingly water-scarce world. The transition to electric vehicles represents perhaps the most significant transformation in Michigan's signature industry since the advent of mass production. All three major automakers have committed to substantial investments in electric vehicle development and production, with Michigan serving as the center for much of this activity. General Motors' commitment to becoming carbon neutral by 2040 and eliminating tailpipe emissions from new light-duty vehicles by 2035 represents a fundamental transformation of the company that has been synonymous with Michigan for over a century. The company's investment in electric vehicle production facilities and battery technology development is creating thousands of new jobs in Michigan. Ford's investment in electric vehicle production, including the F-150 Lightning electric truck and commercial electric vehicles, demonstrates the company's commitment to maintaining its leadership position in the transformed automotive market. The company's partnership with SK Innovation to build battery plants in Michigan represents a new model of international cooperation in the industry. The development of autonomous vehicle technology is another area where Michigan is positioning itself as a global leader. Companies like General Motors' Cruise division, Ford's Argo AI partnership, and numerous technology startups are working to develop self-driving vehicles that could revolutionize transportation. The convergence of electric and autonomous vehicle technologies with advances in artificial intelligence and connectivity is creating entirely new industries and business models. Michigan's universities and companies are at the forefront of research in these areas, positioning the state well for future economic development. The battery industry represents a major opportunity for Michigan to capture value in the electric vehicle supply chain. Several companies have announced plans to build battery manufacturing facilities in Michigan, potentially creating thousands of jobs while reducing dependence on overseas suppliers. Michigan's manufacturing expertise is also being applied to other growing industries. The state has become a center for aerospace manufacturing, with companies like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and numerous suppliers operating facilities in Michigan. The defense industry continues to be important, with Michigan companies producing advanced materials and systems for military applications. The life sciences industry has emerged as another major growth sector for Michigan. The state's universities conduct world-class research in medical technologies, pharmaceuticals, and biotechnology, while companies have established significant operations to commercialize these innovations. However, Michigan also faces significant demographic challenges. The state's population has been relatively stable in recent years, but population loss in many areas, particularly rural communities and older industrial cities, remains a concern. The state must find ways to attract and retain young people while supporting aging communities. The brain drain of educated young adults remains a persistent challenge. While Michigan's universities produce many graduates, too many leave the state to seek opportunities elsewhere. Efforts to create attractive career opportunities and vibrant communities are essential for retaining talent. Urban revitalization remains a major focus, particularly in Detroit and other older industrial cities. While significant progress has been made, many neighborhoods still face challenges related to population loss, property abandonment, and inadequate services. Innovative approaches to urban planning and development are being tested throughout the state. Education continues to be both a challenge and an opportunity for Michigan's future. The state's K-12 education system faces funding challenges and achievement gaps, while universities work to maintain excellence while controlling costs and expanding access. The development of workforce training programs that prepare workers for emerging industries is particularly important. Infrastructure investment remains crucial for Michigan's competitiveness. The state's roads, bridges, water systems, and other infrastructure require significant investment to maintain and modernize. The infrastructure package passed by Congress in 2021 provides new resources, but sustained investment will be necessary. Looking toward the future, Michigan's prospects appear bright despite significant challenges. The state's combination of industrial expertise, educational institutions, natural resources, and entrepreneurial culture provides a strong foundation for continued development. The transformation of the automobile industry, while disruptive, positions Michigan well for the future of transportation. The state's leadership in electric and autonomous vehicles could provide the same competitive advantages that traditional automobile manufacturing once provided. The diversification of Michigan's economy has created resilience and reduced dependence on any single industry. The growth of technology, life sciences, agriculture, and other sectors provides multiple sources of employment and economic growth. Michigan's commitment to innovation and entrepreneurship, demonstrated through its universities, startup ecosystems, and corporate research activities, positions the state well for developing new industries and opportunities. Perhaps most importantly, Michigan's history of overcoming challenges and adapting to change provides confidence that the state can successfully navigate future challenges. From the transformation of the lumber industry to the development of automobile manufacturing to the current transition to a knowledge-based economy, Michigan has repeatedly demonstrated its capacity for renewal and reinvention. The key to Michigan's future success will be continuing to build on its strengths while addressing its challenges. This will require sustained investment in education, infrastructure, and innovation, along with policies that promote equity, sustainability, and economic opportunity for all residents. Michigan's story is far from over. The state that helped build America's industrial might is now helping to build America's sustainable future. With its combination of industrial heritage, natural resources, educational excellence, and innovative spirit, Michigan is well positioned to continue playing a leadership role in America's economic and social development for generations to come.